indeed the only bright star in the Gambia. We are much appreciative of all our talented young Gambians who are here, and we have still a lot in store. So as we move around, we'll inspire a lot more young people to make it here, to engage with our authorities, and to make their marks. Next, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our host for the next panel, which is not definitely going to be a panel, but it's going to be a conversation. There is no specific presentation or long presentations that we had. It's going to be a discussion, and we hope we can all partake in that discussion. Young people, our authorities present, and the mechanisms. Our moderator for this session is a young Gambian, quite dynamic and passionate about youth issues. She had been a champion of youth work, an activist, and of course, a very passionate advocate for gender equity and efforts to end all forms of gender-based violence. But she is also an accomplished journalist with QTV and currently moderating one of the most watched and followed youth TV program called the Youth Dialogue. Without wasting much time, please join me in welcoming Jenaba Sonko to take on the stage. Jenaba, young people, make some noise.
Thank you so much, Lamin. Like he rightly mentioned, my name is Jenaba Sonko. I am the host of the Youth Dialogue on QTV. When I was contacted by Maslam that I'm going to moderate this session, I was so happy because this particular title of this program bears the name of my program. So why wouldn't I run or fly to actually come all the way to Boyam to actually host this program? I'm so honored. And I want to thank the Bright Star Entertainment for the good work that they've been doing. They talked about Tekifi. I always use myself as an example that I have never traveled. I've never been to Dakar. I've never been on an airplane, and I'm in the Gambia, and I feel like I can take it in the Gambia. And that is exactly what all of us should put at the back of our minds as young people. Give it up for the Bright Star Entertainment once again. Well, I think when we talk about reforms process, young people should be in the forefront when it comes to the fight, because they're both the present, and the future. Because they're both the present and the future. And I always quote Baba Gale Jallow when he said that when it comes to the TRRC, they made a deliberate decision to employ 95% of their staff as young people. I always quote him on my show, and I can also see that with the CRC, there are a lot of young people, which means young people are in these institutions and they are already participating, which is quite encouraging. I also want to thank, yes. I also want to use this opportunity to thank the National Youth Council for bringing the National Youth Dialogue on reforms in different areas in the country. They could have decided to stop in the KMC, but decided to also bring it to other regions. This is what we expect from the National Youth Council, because inclusion is what we need in the Gambia, and I believe that this is exactly the way forward. I believe that we're going to have a very fruitful discussion. This is not going to be Youth Dialogue on QTV, me trying to interview people directly and get hard stuff from them. I believe that this is going to be a conversation, because you will also have the opportunity to ask questions, and I will ask questions as well. And questions that I am asking are not in any way personal, but realities that are happening in the Gambia when it comes to reforms. So I will just introduce my panel. I will start with Dr. Baba Gale Jallow, who is the Executive Secretary of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission. Thank you. Yeah. I will also introduce Seni M.K. Marina, Head of Communications, CRC, and a young person for that matter. I will also introduce Justice Emmanuel Juve, Chairman, National Human Rights Commission. Yes. Chairman, National Human Rights Commission, you're welcome. And lastly, I have Rohi Samba, Communications Strategist at the Security Sector Reforms. And the only woman in our midst. Thank you so much. So before we start this conversation, we have a spotlight speaker who is no other person than Hussein Tomasi from the Justice Ministry. Spotlight speaker, you're welcome.
Once again, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Jane Abasonko. I'm happy I'm able to put the name to the face. I watch you on TV too, and I would just want to say more grease to your elbows. Your programs are really inspiring and very good. So keep up the good work. Honorable members of the National Assembly, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I will be very brief. We have a very high panel here, very outstanding personalities to discuss the issues relating to the Transitional Justice Program. And I think it's better I leave the discussion to them. But let me just state briefly that in December 2017, the National Assembly of the Gambia passed 3 important legislations, namely the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission Act, the Constitutional Review Commission Act, as well as the National Human Rights Commission Act. These 3 legislations constitute very significant pillars of the Transitional Justice Program. In the same vein, the government launched the security sector reform, together with other reforms, such as the civil service reform. And early last year, the Commission on the Economic Activities of the former president as it relates to its activities, as it relates to his close associates and family members, was also inaugurated and has since completed its work. It's no more in existence. Some of these commissions that we have established as a government are of a temporary nature. They would last only for a short period of time and fade away. The National Human Rights Commission, of course, is a permanent commission, and it's one that is intended to stay here forever. It's a big innovation, and it's one for which we are as a country commended throughout the world for at this stage of our development to be able to establish a National Human Rights Commission. Of course, the chairman is here. He will tell you its objectives and what they've been doing, but its primary function is the promotion and protection of fundamental human rights of Gambians, and also to serve as a big check on the government to ensure that the government of the Gambia complies with national human rights as enshrined in our constitution and as also enshrined under our international obligations. The TRRC, of course, is intended, like you all know by now, is looking at the past, what happened in the past, and is intended to make recommendations at the end of its term, recommendations that are intended to introduce very massive reforms for this country. I guess we all know why we have established some of these commissions. Like I've stated, these are all institutions very important to transform the Gambia. The Constitution Review Commission is an opportunity for us as Gambians to determine how we want to be governed. It's a lifetime opportunity. It's not every time in a lifetime that you have a constitutional review process. So we as Gambians now have an opportunity to determine how we are going to be governed. And we have a constitution that is going to introduce for the first time term limits. This is already incorporated in the act establishing the Constitutional Review Commission. But let me also state, I will not get into the details of these commissions and so on. The experts are here. But let me also state that as a government, these commissions that we have established are independent of government. The acts establishing them clearly state that they will function independent of government, they will function without interference from government. As a government, we also went through a very lengthy and elaborate process to ensure that we have the right people to staff and manage these commissions for us. If you look at the TRRC, it comprises representatives from all over the country. The commissioners themselves were appointed, if I may say so. They were selected and appointed by the president, but the selection process that we went through was by virtue of asking the people in the various regions to actually select these commissioners for us. The president just did the ministerial act of appointing them, but the appointments actually came from the people of the Gambia. It was not the government that handpicked the commissioners. It was the people who themselves decided who the commissioners would be. The same applies for the National Human Rights Commission. We involved civil society, and we related their appointments. We passed it through the National Assembly. It was the National Assembly that finally shortlisted the list of 9 candidates that were presented to them, and they merely presented it to the president who appointed them. I'm just giving these instances just to show that as a government, we went through a very lengthy, transparent process to ensure that we have independent commissions that would work in the best interest of Gambians and all of us, not just to work in the interest of the government. The government is not manipulating these commissions. The government did not manipulate the appointments. The government worked with civil society, worked with the Gambian people. And this is the first time, I may say, that this is happening in this country. It is a novelty that you ask the people, appoint, and they did. So I think on that brief note, we have people here adequately resourced who know these commissions. But just to emphasize that so far, the journey is so good. We are happy about the outcomes that we are getting from these commissions. The Constitutional Review Commission will complete its mandate very soon, and they have promised us that they will deliver a constitution by the end of the year. And we all know the importance of having a new constitution in this country. We all know what happened to the previous constitution. It was not one in which the wishes and aspirations of Gambians were reflected, and it was one that had certainly no term limits. As for the TRRC, we are all excited about its work. And we have all now seen the importance of having a TRRC in place. We all recognize that it was important that we put a TRRC in place. But even then, before we established the TRRC, we had gone around the country and spoken to Gambians, and Gambians overwhelmingly endorsed the need for us to have a TRRC. And of course, each and every Gambian should be proud that today we have a National Human Rights Commission that can serve as a watchdog to the government. And mind you, it is independent of government, and it is a permanent body. I think briefly, ladies and gentlemen, I will stop here and allow the discussion to continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I guess, yes. Yeah. I guess we can go ahead. Thank you so much for that brilliant statement. I don't think it's necessary to ask my panelists about why they are institutions and what they are doing, because I think he has already mentioned that. So we're just going to go straight to the questions that we have. And don't forget that it's not just my questions. You have a chance to also ask them questions. And to my panelists, also remember that we have interpretation at the side, so we can take it easy so that they'll be able to get the message properly. So we will start with Seni MK Marina, Head of Communications at the CRC. We would want you to tell us the most prominent submissions made by young people during the constitutional review process, and how best do you think these prominent submissions will be able to be implemented?
Good afternoon, everyone. As the moderator of this session earlier on alluded, my name is Seni MK Marina. I am the head of communication at the Constitutional Review Commission. But before then, I'm a journalist and still one. Just that I was snatched away just to do a work. And very soon, I will join my colleagues back in the journalism field. Just to give you a brief background and mandate of the Constitutional Review Commission, the CRC was established by an Act of Parliament of 2017 to draft a new constitution for the Republic of the Gambia, and by doing so, also come up with a report that will accompany the draft constitution for the people of this great country. Basically, we have started work since June 2018, and during this period, a lot of consultations were done, both in country and external, because our mandate is to collect the views, aspirations of Gambians as to how they wish to be governed in the new draft constitution. And you cannot do that without consulting with the Gambian, because we are building a constitution for the Gambian and by the Gambians, and therefore everyone should be involved in this very crucial national undertaking. So we have decided to go in, consult Gambians from all walks of life. If you remember, a couple of months ago, we were, in the interior of the country trying to talk to Gambians about how they wish to be governed in the new draft constitution. And cognizant of the fact that the majority of this population are young people, we have appointed a youth commissioner in the person of Yankuba Manjang, who is sitting at the commission solely to propagate for the welfare and concerns of the young people. And since then, young people have been taking leadership roles at the commission. Young people have been at the forefront in taking the ownership of the review process. Myself, I can proudly tell you, I am the youngest head of department at the Constitutional Review Commission, because the commission believes that young people are critical players in this reform process. And you cannot have success without involving them in this review process. And from there too, we have engaged young people in trying to send our messages across. Bright Star Entertainment, that just performed here amazingly, were our first contact. They did us a theme song, and this have been played across various radio stations in the country. So we have been engaging young people. They also made a very brilliant submission, because we have been receiving submission from people like organizations, individuals, interest groups. And I can tell you the National Youth Council, under the leadership of Lamin Dabo, made a very brilliant submission. And the submission entails serious concerns that have been raised by youths from across the country. If you remember, the young people organized themselves together and went around the country on a caravan on a subject, the Constitution we want. So the feedbacks that were emanated from those consultations among young people were submitted to the CRC. And I can tell you, as we speak now, we have started writing the new Constitution. And then the issue of young people is seriously reflected in this drafting process, because there is a youth representative who is also very concern about the plight of young people. So I can tell you that the young people are part and parcel of the CRC review process. And very soon we'll go back again to the people to present them the draft constitution. This will be in November. And then I believe young people will be part and parcel of this process again. So I can assure you that young people at the review process are part and parcel of this entire process. So I will stop here and then allow questions in the near future. Thank you.
I hope what you just mentioned reflects on the Constitution. We are patiently waiting. Yes. Yes. The next question goes to Justice Juve, Chairman, National Human Rights Commission. The question is, how ready is the Commission to stress the issue of human rights in the school curriculums in order to erase what we had to go through for 22 years? Because everything starts from the grassroots. If these young people at that early age are stressed with the rule of law, are stressed with human rights in general, certainly we will get to see changes. So how ready is your commission to fulfill that?
Okay. Thank you very much. And I thank the conference organizers for inviting the National Human Rights Commission to be part of this dialogue. As Mr. Tomasi stated in his statement, the National Human Rights Commission, among the other commissions, is the newest. But the difference is that we're permanent. They will all phase out, and we are here to stay. Our primary mandate is to promote and protect human rights. Promotion and protection of human rights with the objective of inculcating a culture of human rights in this country. And the creation of the National Human Rights Commission, it's timely and important because of the context where we're coming from. Whereas we used to ridicule human rights, and we've discovered that ridiculing and not taking human rights seriously, it's dangerous. And that's why we have the TRRC, and with the never again slogan, which we are running away with. Because as was stated, we look at things from now forward. So, as I mentioned, our job is to inculcate a culture of human rights throughout the Gambia. And we do so by using a multi-pronged approach. Awareness raising is very important, and that we are going to do, and we have started doing. But the Human Rights Commission can also investigate. It has powers to investigate human rights violation. It has powers to receive complaints and look at that complaint. It has powers to educate. It has powers to advise the government on legislation and laws that are inconsistent with human rights provision. We will definitely be collaborating with the youths. It's important. 65% of the population of the country, if I'm looking at statistics, belong to that category called youth. So therefore, there is nothing you can do meaningfully in this country if you do not have the youths on board. And that brings us to the mandate, one of the mandates we have, which is education. Human rights education is paramount, because you cannot build a culture without educating, raising the awareness and educating. And that we will do. We have just started rolling out our activities. Just 2 weeks ago, we invited civil society in a 3-day workshop where we brought civil society together with National Human Rights Commission, because these civil society, and among the groups invited were the youths. Gomsa Bopa, as prominent as they are, the National Youth Council was also invited, and many others, because we feel that the job that we're going to do will be in partnership with the youths. And it's very important. Of course, we'll also roll out activities with universities, with tertiary institutions. So our work is an ongoing process. But just to explain the importance of the youths, really, you cannot do anything without involvement of the youths, and for obvious reasons. The 1994 coup d'etat, if you look at it, was spearheaded by youths. In fact, I think the oldest was 29 at the time, who was Yahya Jammeh. And by the time we went, that's why they even reduced the age. And I hope in this case they will not reduce. If we have the age limit, they will not reduce it. I remember the first draft was talking, the president must be 40, and they reduced it to 30. Okay, the point I'm making is that the youths are important. They are in the majority, they're energetic, they are vibrant, and they are the future leaders of this country. So involving the youths means therefore you're creating a better society. If you do not involve them properly, then we're creating bad leadership. We are creating a society which perhaps will be ungovernable. So it is therefore important to include them, but also the youths must also understand that they have to be cooperative. In Gambia, I think I'll probably stop here because I'm sure there will be many other questions coming, but we have the youth population that feels self-entitled. We have a youth population that are not tolerant, but also that is characteristics of youth. Youths are militant, they want results now. We also have a youth population, a big population, part of it, which are not also disciplined. We also have, it has been complained about, if you look at people who are investing in the Gambia, they'll tell you that we also sometimes have a lazy youth population. But I think it's a mixture of all. We also need a government to create a conducive environment where the youths will be able to realize their full potential in education, and also building skill centers, centers of learning. In Gambia, I will say this, we are very good at constructing mosques and churches, but which is good. We call ourselves a predominantly religious society. But we have to create skill centers, research centers, education of learning, where these youths also can be very productive and compete in the world so that we can have a better society. I have many more other things to say, but I will stop there. You know, lawyers talk a lot.
I see that. But a follow-up question for you. You talked about the fact that the commission receives complaints. Do you have any complaint mechanism clearly spelled out to the citizens, clearly spelled out to avoid the frequent protests that we are seeing? Is it clearly spelled out to the general public?
Okay, that is a very, very valid and good question. As I talk to you, the National Human Rights Commission, it's currently working on its internal documents. And very soon, we have just concluded and adopted as a commission a complaints form. This complaint form will be rolled out so that everybody will even have a website very soon, so that you can access. And if you have a complaint, you'll know how to go about it. So we're setting up this process of complaint, and we will raise the awareness of everybody on how to access the National Human Rights Commission. So it's work in progress.
I'm glad that it's work in progress. So we'll go to Dr. Baba Gale Jallow. I'm always excited to share the same panel with you due to the fact that you're always in support when it comes to the progress of young people. Why should TRRC matter to young people?
Thank you very much, Ms. Sonko. I'm excited to share a panel with you too. The TRRC is extremely focused on young people because we are dealing with a number of legacies, two main legacies. We're dealing with a 22-year-old legacy of human rights violations, and we are dealing with an older legacy that has to do with the political culture of the country. And we can't really transform this country. We can't really prevent a recurrence of dictatorship if we do not change the mindsets of the people, especially the young people, empower the young people. And so that is why from the very beginning, we made it a point to make sure that the young people are the majority of the staff of the TRRC. We actually have a 98% employment of young people on the TRRC staff. We also have a specialized unit, a unit that is dedicated to the empowerment of children and young people, and that is the Youth and Children's Network Unit, headed by your colleague, Wakar Sambu. They have visited schools across the country, about 50 schools now. They've engaged about 50,000 students across the country. They bring young people to the TRRC to attend the hearings. I think we are also innovative in the sense that we are the first commission or the first public institution to engage the beach boys or the beach youth, the Bumpsters. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a town hall with them. They call themselves the Chanters. They don't want to be called Bumpsters. And so essentially what I'm trying to say is that we are serious about transforming the political culture of this country, and you cannot transform the political culture of the country if you don't transform the mindsets of the young people and empower the young people to take up their rightful roles in this country. So essentially, our key message would be to all young people that they should go out there and get ID cards and get voters cards and participate in the political process of this country. I think that might answer your question.
Just a follow-up question. I asked about stressing in the school curriculum the issue of human rights. If this is done, how do you think it will help when it comes to the Never Again campaign?
Certainly including human rights in the school curriculum is extremely important. I think my good colleague here, Mr. Diouf, will push for human rights to be part of the curriculum. I think it would be very important for Gambian young people or for the Gambian school curriculum to actually include also constitutional studies in the curriculum from a very early age. All Gambian children should be able to understand their constitution. They should be able to know what their responsibilities are, what their duties are as citizens, but also what their powers are as citizens. So I think it would be very important to have it in the school curriculum.
I guess we are looking forward to that. The next question goes to Rohi Samba, Communications Strategist, Security Sector Reform. How ready is your team to change the conditions of the prisons, including providing counseling, skills training, rehabilitation, amongst others, part of security sector reform?
Thank you very much, Jainaba, for having me here. I feel very privileged to be part of this very historic moment in our country's history. Historic in the sense that it comes in the wake of two very significant events: the birth of our new transition, which has given rise to the new democratic dispensation that we have, and also the entrenchment of reforms in our country. And this is a very laudable achievement. First of all, when we talk about security sector reform, we are referring to the formulation and the reorientation of individuals, institutions, and oversight bodies, including corporate bodies, to align themselves with democratic norms and also to be accountable to the security and justice needs of the citizenry. Since 1965, our security apparatus have been regime-centric. Now the new national security policy espouses the ideal of human security, which goes beyond the traditional state-centric approach that deals with security against internal and external aggression, to the human security aspect of social, environmental, political, as well as economic, not to mention also human rights. When you talk about security sector reform, and you talk about the security sector institutions, there are a number of them, and we are all involved inadvertently. Security institutions include the 8 security apparatus that are well known. These are GAF, of course, Gambia Police, Immigration, GRA, and the rest of them. You have the oversight institutions, such as the National Assembly. You also have the justice institutions, such as MOJ. But also you have the media and the civil population, which is where the youths come in. When you talk about the reforms also, following a very thorough assessment, where there was a 27 technical working group that was spread across the country to make inquiries, to to assess the justice and security needs of the citizenry. 5 thematic areas were outlined. One of them was to address post-authoritarian legacies, and the next one was specific reforms relating to institutions, and that refers to the security institutions, including the Gambia Prison Services. Now, reforms are unlike commissions. Reforms are not palliative measures that will satisfy a communal need. The security sector reform, when you talk about it, is a process. And as a process, it has stages. The first stage is what has been completed in 2017 when the assessment report was handed over to government, and it's public document for everybody who wants to read it. It's out there in the public forum. And then you come to the different policies of the different institutions, which is currently underway. As you know, we are currently drafting the security sector reform strategy, which is in the final stages. And from there, you would be able to see that all the institutions are addressed. Because let's face it, since 1965, our institutions have been regime-centric. Public welfare was a secondary aspect. There was a vast degeneration of capacity. There was lack of oversight of these security institutions. But more than that, during the 22 years of authoritarian rule, there was a skewed, like an intentional process to make the security sector politicized, to the extent that most of these institutions are devoid of democratic principles. The prison services are doing their reforms just as all the other institutions. They are not very visible because as a process, it's supposed to be lengthy. However, you remember the graduation of the first prison inmates, and that was the first time in history where prison inmates were graduated on skills. And that's part of the reform process. There are other things like the movement, relocation of the prisons. These are currently underway. We're working with the different sponsors to assist that. And more reforms will actually take place, but they will all be guided by the documents. We cannot be able to jump the horse and start doing things haphazardly. We need a policy to guide action, and from there we need also the institutional policies to align with the national policy so that we can do things effectively, and in the end of it all, we will say we have a successful security sector reform. I hope this answers your question.
The next question has to do with attitudinal change when it comes to security sector reforms. The Human Rights Commission recently organized a training for police officers. And in an interview, we were surprised that the police officer said she did not know that she was violating the rights of people because she did not know. So when it comes to attitudinal change, how far?
It just takes us back to the whole issue of security sector reform, which I alluded to earlier, that there is a process. When the Barrow government came into power, there was a moratorium on recruitment, 3 years for GAF and 2 years for all the other security institutions. So you realize that the people there are still the people there. We have gaps which have been identified in the assessment report, and these have been subject to the thematic areas I've just mentioned. And of course, it won't be a big news because there's severe degeneration of capacity in all of these institutions, and that's what the security sector reform is working to do. Change of mindset takes years, it takes generations, but it must be done with care. So there's a duty for all of us to care, a duty to care to ensure that this is done right and that we reap the results that we want within the context of the work that we are assigned to do. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think it's time for us to take questions from the audience. Maslam, I think it's time for us now to take questions from the audience before we go ahead. I think we can just have them ask the questions. We can just give them the mic and they can ask. Yes, so we we want to take questions from the audience. Yes, we have one.
So I'll be helping if possible, take as much question as possible. So we're done with this, and then we'll come back here. Okay. I'll be helping you. So for it to be fast, somebody comes here, I'll pass to stand beside so that it will be fast. Okay, then so just tell them because of the mic. Hi. Yes, so if you have a question, you can come on. You can come here and then ask your question. And also, if you don't want to come here, there is a box. You can write your questions and then put them inside the box. We'll give them to the moderator. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, the able panelists. I'm Honorable Lamin Jesane, a member for Brikama South constituency. Generally, before I come to my question, I only want to observe one thing. Probably that could be a question to the organizers, maybe to the National Youth Council or the executive director. If you look at the term, this is very, very much enterprising. With regards to the topics on the ground here, the commissions, all the commissions are very important. And without fixing this thing in their right place, I believe it's going to be difficult to get the Gambia we want. But one fundamental commission, which is virtually affecting the youth, is missing. That is the Land Commission, which is extremely very important. Because if you look at the emerging conflict in the country, in my own opinion, 50% of which are all land crises in the country. And if you look at the incidences that occur in the country, where we have a number of youths that died in the conflict, are all land crises. And it would have been very important for that also to be included, probably in the other engagement. My question specifically will go to the security expert. If you look at the security sector reform, this is also very important. One thing, I don't know whether it's within your mandate to go beyond the security denomination reform and look at the economic aspect of our reform, which is the push factor for almost our youth to go through the back way. Do you have any intention to include that aspect so that the economic aspect of our security could be taken care of, and that of the social aspect, in order to use to have confidence in this country to stay, rather than going through the back way? Thank you.
So I guess we will take all of the questions, and then they have jotted the questions down. So we take all of the questions, and then they will answer later. So we can take the next one.
Further, yeah.
Is it good afternoon? Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fatou Diao, Deputy Speaker, National Youth Parliament, the Gambia. First of all, before I will ask my questions to the right individuals, I just want to appeal to make a comment. And if I am permitted, I would actually want to talk to everyone, like the young people and the duty bearers, especially those from the side of the government, like the advisor to the Minister of Justice and the National Assembly or our elected representatives. My concern is about the human rights or security situation in our country. I believe as a young person, I'm a youth advocate and representative of young people. I have been engaging in discussions with a lot of young people. And if I am to be honest with you all here, we will believe that there is a mistrust between the government and the young people of this country, and that even leads to the security and the civilian mistrust. So what I'm trying to communicate is that there is already this gap between the young people and those people that are governing us. So to the young people, I actually want to plead that if there is a problem with our government, that we feel we have a problem to solve, violence is never the solution. We have principles that are set for us to use those mechanisms to engage our elected representatives. But also, the government also needs to understand that people have their entitlements, and not everyone feels that they are, the needs and their entitlements are actually met. So what I want to suggest to both the citizens and the government is for the government, from the president, executive, and the National Assembly or elected representatives, to summon a dialogue with the citizens. My honest opinion is that the fact that the government, especially the president, is keeping quiet about the situation of the country is not helping. Because we are seeing people that are actually talking about these 3 years Jotna, and it's actually a threat. To me, I believe even if there should be a peaceful protest, which they are entitled to do, but we have people in society who don't actually want to engage in something peaceful. And I think the situation of the country is so fragile that we shouldn't allow it to escalate. So I believe the only thing, because if those people want to protest as their right, the government want to use force, it wouldn't work. Because two bad things or two wrongs can never make a right. So I want to summon the government to actually, from the president, to come down and have a bantaba with their citizens, the electorate. Tell them that we are not here to oppress you. You bring out that confidence and restore the confidence and trust in the citizen. And I believe these people behind the movement and anybody who feel aggrieved by the government will listen, and the government to listen to the people and their recommendations and concerns. This is something that I want you people to take up and engage the government to have a dialogue with its citizens and the electorate. I thank you. Now, going to my questions to the panelists. My first question will actually go to the National Human Rights Commission chairman. It is indeed a great honor and privilege to have you here. I have been discussing, like yesterday we had a session, I facilitated a session on the National Human Rights Commission, and some of the concerns and the recommendations were that they feel that the other commissions have youth commissioners representing like young people, and they have a lot of young people, but their concern is that among the commissioners, there is no young person or a commissioner that is a youth representative. Now, my question is, how will you reconcile this confusion? What is going to be what the commission will do to make sure young people are represented, even though a youth commissioner is not there? And the other question is to the security sector. What are you trying to do to make sure that the security personnel and the civilians have this cordial relationship towards building peace and stability in the Gambia? Thank you so much.
Yeah, can you have?
Okay, good afternoon. I have two questions. One of my questions will be going to the guy from the Human Rights Commission. My question is, how is the Human Rights Commission working with the security sectors? With the security sectors, to show them that how they should understand the draft document that we are trying to put in place. Because we realize that most of the security sectors didn't know some of the rights of we the citizens. So what do you think you are putting in place so that they understand the documents that you are going to draft? Now, my second question is going to the guy from the CRC. How consultative was the CRC in engaging the security sectors to know the Constitution? Because I was shocked once watching the TRC, where a security personnel said, you can obey an unlawful act by order. If your senior man gives you order, even if it's unlawful, you need to obey it. So how is the CRC trying to at least consult or engage security personnel to understand the Constitution? So those are my two questions.
Please introduce yourself and direct your question. Answer. Okay.
We can have them answer, okay. And then from there, because they might get to forget some of the ideas that they have. I think the first question was for, yes, I think the first question was for Rohi Samba when it comes to security reforms in the Gambia.
Zainaba, I'm not very sure I understand the question properly, but I'll try to answer. The question was, is there a kind of involvement of the economic factors in security to thwart the backway syndrome, sort of? As I alluded to earlier, we have a very regime-centric security that is a legacy of our past, but it was more so prominent during the 22 years of authoritarian rule, where exactly what you are alluding to was what Jammeh was doing, engaging the youth bulge by bringing them into the security, some not necessarily through the front door, some from the back way. And this had caused a lot of problems. Because when we talk about security and we want to do effective governance, we need a security sector that is not only capable, but that has the capacity that is commensurate with the resources we have. If we have 1,000 security personnel and 2 cars, that's not an effective security sector. In case there's a problem somewhere, maybe the cars don't even have fuel. It's not good utilization of our security as well. So we need a streamlined security sector that is capable and accountable to democratic principles. So the economic factor can come in when you talk about development as a nexus of security, because without security, there cannot be development, there cannot be peace, there cannot be stability. Why the emphasis is on security is because of this very thing, which is why it became a very prominent issue at governance level, featured highly at the National Development Plan, that security is the nexus of development. They are not mutually exclusive. They go together. And in order to have any economic stability, there has to be security. I hope I answered it properly. If I don't, please come and explain yourself again. The second one was about security personnel and civilian relationships. You have a lot of CIMIC activities amongst the security, which is the civil-military coordination. You have the community policing that was mentioned yesterday. There are lots of activities that are getting to be implemented through the security sector reform policy. But as I say, we were guided by a very abysmal constitution that was at the whims and mercy of an authoritarian ruler who, on the last count, has changed the constitution 52 times in 22 years to satisfy his own urges. And this constitution in itself, aside from being defective, was also lacking in sufficient subordinate rules, policies, and guidelines. So most of these security were bound by those constitutions, and it was difficult for them to act according to democratic principles because there was a blatant lack of democratic principles and oversight in the constitution that they were using. So basically, how we are going to do it is through the security sector reform policy. We are going to formulate, and if need be, reorient these policies that are existing to ensure that they meet the democratic norms that we aspire for through our human security approach. I hope that answers the questions.
I think the next question goes to the Human Rights Commission when it comes to the fact that there is no youth representation, that is, there's no youth commissioner. And you just mentioned that you also want to comment on her recommendation that the president should come out and have a national dialogue with the electorate.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would first of all want to agree with you 100% that there is a big mistrust between the youths currently and especially the police. And that has manifested itself in the events that took place in July, and among other things. Not long ago, there was an incident where a police officer actually stabbed a youth in the process of arrest, and I think that police officer has now been charged with murder. So there is tension. There is tension, and this tension needs to be addressed. And the National Human Rights Commission is very concerned about this, and that was why we, just last week, we had a training program with junior and mid-level officers, 30 of them, on human rights and human rights themes. And also, we are going to engage the senior level police officers very soon in this, in a dialogue and training. So it's very important. You see, the thing is, Gambians were very good at sweeping things under the carpet while things are brewing. And we should learn. And I think we should really be serious in learning things. We have, not long ago, April 10 and 11. It happened. We cannot just sit there and hope and say this is a blessed country. God has blessed us. Things are brewing, and there needs to be understanding between the youths and the police especially. Let me start by saying that really the police are working under very difficult challenges, and they also have a primary function to maintain law and order. The law gives them the powers to apprehend offenders, to protect property, and to even prosecute in summary matters. But what we are saying is this: things must be done in accordance with law. There has to be due process in whatever we do. So even the police are not above the law. Now, why am I saying this? Let us not again fool ourselves. We have a 22 years of a police force that had executive interference. It's a fact. I was a magistrate during that period, and when you even give bail to people, the police will be directed not to give bail. These were things they were being interfered with. So fast forward it, after 22 years, we have a police system, and as my lady friend here said, when you're changing attitudes, it's a process. When you're reorienting people, it's a process. And the police service need to be oriented. The police service, they need to be screened and vetted, because there are genuine complaints about the way they do things. Due process must be followed in everything that we do. But we must quickly say, we do not condone youth burning. Arson is not condoned. We cannot have a society that cannot be governed. We cannot have a society that is reduced to anarchy. Even economic success comes with law and order. Tourists won't even come to this country if we have, you rightly said, we have this 3-year Jotna. You also, I want to agree with you, people have a fundamental right to actually protest. They have a fundamental right to talk about their grievances openly. But they must also do it in accordance with law. The authorities must also understand that give them the right escort, talk to the organizers so that there won't be problems in the process. But we have to move away. It cannot be business as usual as it used to happen. Gambia has changed. The authorities must understand. The youths must also understand that they have to actually abide by the rule of law. But the security forces must know that. You cannot sweep these things under the carpet. I was one of those lawyers who actually went to court to defend the youth in 2011 with the Minister of Justice. So when I talk about these things, I'm not just talking of the books out of there. I mean it, and I know that if we do not address these things, it could come to haunt us. And now that you have said, I will take to my commissioners, and the National Human Rights Commission, as soon as possible, will try to convene a dialogue between the government, especially the security service and the police, to bring in this dialogue so that we can foster in this understanding. But there is a big mistrust. Your second question about the youths in the commission, you're right. Unless you see Commissioner Nyundu Drame, who you all love, he's a commissioner, and I would say that he represents the youth. You see, the definition of youth is very broad. I remember in Zimbabwe, the head of the youth thing was about 55. So I think I might, if going by the definition, I'm even a youth. But on a serious note, yes, you are right. But it was the way the process of selection. You see, unlike many commissions as well,